Zixtar's claws clicked nervously against his datapad as he stared at the message that had just arrived at the Galactic Council's Intelligence Center. His small rat-like ears twitched as he read the words again, hoping he had made some terrible mistake. The hegemony of Kethvar had declared war on Earth. He rubbed his whiskers and looked around the busy command center. Other analysts were going about their normal work, checking trade routes and monitoring minor disputes between colonies. None of them had seen what he was looking at. The message was marked for his eyes only, since Earth fell under his area of responsibility. Zixtar had been watching human space for 15 years now. The humans were new to the galaxy, having only made contact 50 years ago. They were friendly traders who sold simple goods and asked lots of questions about everything. Their technology was basic, their military was small, and they seemed more interested in learning about other species than building weapons, which made this declaration of war completely insane. The Kethvar were not known for making mistakes. They were a warrior race that had conquered 17 star systems in the last 100 years. When they decided to attack someone, they did it with overwhelming force and careful planning. They studied their targets for years before striking, learning every weakness and strength. But Earth? What was there to study? Zixtar pulled up Earth's military files on his screen. The humans had maybe 50 ships that could be called warships, and even those were mostly converted cargo vessels with basic weapons bolted on. Their planetary defenses consisted of some old missile platforms around their moon and a few orbital stations that looked like they were built from spare parts. The Kethvar Third Fleet had 300 ships, including massive battle cruisers that could destroy entire cities with one shot. Each Kethvar ship was worth 10 human vessels in firepower and armor. It would not even be a fair fight, so why were the Kethvar bothering? Zixtar's mind raced through possibilities as he dug deeper into the files. Maybe the humans had something valuable that he did not know about. He checked the resource reports from Earth's solar system. Nothing special. Some rare metals in the asteroid belt, but dozens of systems had better mining opportunities. Maybe it was about location. He pulled up the star charts. Earth was not on any major trade routes. It was actually in a fairly quiet corner of the galaxy, far from the important shipping lanes and political centers. Maybe the humans had insulted the Kethvar somehow. He searched through diplomatic records looking for any incidents between the two species. The only contact he found was a brief trade meeting 3 years ago where humans had sold the Kethvar some basic computer components. The Kethvar representative had noted that human technology was primitive but adequate, not exactly fighting words. Zixtar leaned back in his chair and scratched behind one of his large ears. In all his years of intelligence work, he had never seen anything like this. The Kethvar were predictable. They attacked when they had overwhelming advantages and clear goals. This attack made no sense by any normal military logic. He decided to dig deeper into human history, looking for clues he might have missed. The humans had been busy since joining the galactic community. They had set up trade relationships with dozens of species, always asking questions and always eager to learn new things. They seemed fascinated by alien technology and culture, like children discovering a wonderful new toy. But as Zixtar read through the reports, something strange began to emerge from the pattern. The humans asked a lot of questions about military technology, not in an obvious way, but they were always curious about ship designs, weapon systems, and defensive strategies. When other species shared stories about famous battles, humans listened very carefully and asked very detailed questions. When the Gornaks had bragged about their new shield technology, humans had asked how it worked and what could penetrate it. When the Villani had described their latest missile systems, humans had wanted to know about guidance systems and countermeasures. When the Kethvar themselves had mentioned their famous victory at Xerion Prime, humans had asked about fleet formations and battle tactics. At the time, everyone had thought the humans were just naturally curious. They asked questions about everything, from alien music to cooking techniques. But now Zixtar wondered if there had been a pattern he had missed. He pulled up communication records from human space. In the week since the Kethvar had begun moving their fleet toward Earth, human military chatter had remained surprisingly calm. There were no emergency mobilizations, no desperate calls for help from their few allies, no signs of panic at all. Either the humans had not figured out they were about to be attacked, or they were not worried about it. Zixtar found both possibilities equally disturbing. He opened a new file and began typing a message to the Galactic Council's military advisors. They needed to know about this situation. A war between the Kethavar and the humans would be over quickly, but it might set a dangerous precedent. If the Kethavar started attacking weak species for no clear reason, it could destabilize the entire region. As he wrote, Zixtar tried to push down a growing feeling of unease. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. The Kethavar were brutal, but they were not stupid. They had to have a reason for attacking Earth, even if he could not see it. Maybe the humans had hidden weapons he did not know about. Maybe they had made secret alliances with powerful species. Maybe they had discovered some new technology that made them a threat. Or maybe the Kethavar had simply made a terrible mistake. Zixtar finished his report and sent it off to the council. Then he leaned back in his chair and stared at the star charts on his wall. Somewhere out there, a Kethavar fleet was moving toward Earth, and he had no idea what would happen when they arrived. He had a feeling he was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. Whether it would be the shortest war ever recorded or something else entirely, he could not say. But one thing was certain. After the Kethavar reached Earth, nothing would be the same. The small analyst began preparing observation protocols and communication channels. If the galaxy was about to watch a species die, someone needed to document it properly. If the humans had some impossible trick up their sleeves, someone needed to record that too. Zixtar just hoped he would live long enough to understand what he was about to. See, the clock on his desk showed 36 standard hours until the Kethavar fleet reached Earth's solar system. Soon the galaxy would have its answers, even if those answers made no sense at all. Admiral Tekfor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars stream past as his fleet moved toward the Sol system. The massive Kethavar had led fleets into battle for 40 years, and he had never lost a single engagement. But something about this mission bothered him. The humans should be running by now. His fleet had been moving toward Earth for 2 weeks, making no attempt to hide their approach. Any competent species would have detected them days ago and begun preparing defenses or calling for help. But according to his scouts, human space traffic continued as if nothing was happening. Human cargo ships still followed their regular trade routes. Human passenger vessels still carried tourists to their outer colonies. Human military patrols still followed their normal schedules, moving at the leisurely pace of a species that thought it was safe. Either the humans were completely unaware of the approaching fleet, or they were so confident in their defenses that they saw no need to change their routine. Admiral Tekfor found both possibilities equally unlikely. He had studied the intelligence reports on human military capabilities dozens of times. Their fleet was tiny and outdated. Their weapons were primitive projectile systems that would barely scratch Kethavar armor. Their defensive positions were obvious and vulnerable, yet High Command had insisted on sending the entire Third Fleet to deal with them. 300 ships to conquer one small planet seemed like using a hammer to kill an insect. But High Command did not make mistakes. If they thought Earth required the full Third Fleet, there had to be a reason. Meanwhile, millions of light-years away, Zixtar was having his own troubles. The Galactic Council had agreed to send an observation fleet to witness the coming battle, but they refused to take his concerns seriously. The humans are a peaceful trading species, Council Member Vorix had told him during the emergency session. This will be over in a matter of hours. We are only sending observers to document the tragedy and prepare humanitarian aid for any survivors. Zixtar had tried to explain his growing suspicions about human intelligence gathering and their strangely calm response to the threat, but the Council had dismissed his concerns as overthinking. The facts were simple. A powerful military fleet was about to attack a weak civilian target. The outcome was predetermined, but as Zixtar reviewed the data for the 100th time, new patterns kept emerging. Human trade missions had visited every major military power in the galaxy over the past 50 years. Human scientists had attended weapons demonstrations and military exercises as observers. Human students had studied at war colleges across dozens of worlds. At first glance, it looked like normal academic and commercial exchange. But when Zixtar mapped out all the information the humans had gathered, it painted a comprehensive picture of galactic military capabilities, strategies, and weaknesses. The humans knew exactly how every major fleet operated. They knew the strengths and limitations of every weapon system. They knew the tactical preferences of every military commander, including Admiral Thekfor. On Earth, General Sarah Chen sat in a conference room deep beneath the North American Command Center, reviewing final preparations with her staff. The meeting was being conducted in the open, using standard military communication channels that any listening alien fleet could easily intercept. Lunar defense platforms are reporting ready status, Colonel Martinez announced. All missile batteries are loaded and targeting systems are online. Good, General Chen replied calmly. And the Mars orbital stations? Standing by, General. Their kinetic weapons are charged and ready to engage. Excellent. What about civilian evacuation procedures? All major cities have been notified of the recommended shelter protocols. Emergency supplies have been distributed to the underground facilities. To any alien listening to the conversation, it sounded like standard defensive preparations. The humans were planning to fight from their moon and Mars, using basic weapons to try to slow down the HFY advance. While their civilians hid in bunkers, it was exactly what any military analyst would expect from a primitive species facing a superior force. But General Chen's aide, Major Williams, noticed something odd about the meeting. Despite discussing the approaching destruction of their world, everyone in the room seemed remarkably calm. There was no panic, no desperate urgency, no sense of impending doom. Instead, there was an atmosphere of quiet anticipation, like actors waiting for their cue to take the stage. Admiral Thekfor's fleet had now entered the outer edge of the Sol system, passing the orbit of the human's outermost planet. His sensors detected the expected signs of human activity: mining operations in the asteroid belt, research stations around the gas giants, communication satellites throughout the system. Everything looked exactly as it had in the intelligence reports. Nothing seemed unusual or threatening, but Admiral Thekfor had not survived 40 years of warfare by ignoring his instincts, and his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Increase sensor sweeps, he ordered his crew. I want detailed scans of every human installation in this system. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we are detecting standard mining equipment in the asteroid belt. Energy signatures match civilian industrial operations, no signs of military installations. And the research stations around Jupiter? Standard scientific equipment, sir. Radio telescopes, atmospheric probes, orbital laboratories. Nothing that appears to be military in nature. Admiral Thekfor nodded, but his unease continued to grow. The humans were either completely helpless or completely confident. Both options worried him. Zixtar's observation fleet had taken position at the edge of the Sol system, far enough away to avoid the coming battle but close enough to record everything that happened. His sensors were focused on both fleets, trying to understand what was really going on. The HFY fleet was moving in standard attack formation, approaching Earth from the direction that would give them the best tactical advantage. Their approach was textbook perfect, exactly what Zixtar would have expected from Admiral Thekfor. The human defenders, meanwhile, seemed to be following an equally predictable defensive strategy. Their ships were positioned around Earth and Mars in obvious defensive formations. Their weapons were trained on the most likely approach routes. Everything looked normal, too normal. Zixtar had studied enough military engagements to know that real battles were messy, confused affairs where plans fell apart and commanders had to adapt on the fly. But this looked like both sides were following a script that someone had written in advance. As the HFY fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, Admiral Thekfor noticed that the human defensive positions were becoming clearer. Lunar missile platforms, Mars orbital weapons, a small fleet positioned between Earth and its moon. It was exactly what he had expected to find, which was precisely what bothered him. In his experience, enemies rarely did exactly what you expected them to do. They tried to surprise you, to gain some advantage through unexpected tactics or hidden weapons. But the humans seemed to be playing by the book, setting up their defenses in the most obvious possible way. Either they were the most predictable military force he had ever encountered, or they wanted him to think they were predictable. Admiral Thekfor found himself hoping it was the former, because if it was the latter, he was walking into a trap that he could not yet see. The distance to Earth continued to shrink. Soon the real battle would begin and all the questions would be answered, one way or another. Admiral Thekvor's fleet reached the inner Sol system exactly on schedule. His sensors showed the human defensive positions clearly now. Missile platforms scattered across the moon's surface, orbital weapons around Mars, and a small fleet of human warships positioned near Earth. Everything was exactly where his intelligence reports had predicted it would be. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Target the lunar installations first. We will clear their outer defenses before moving on the planet itself." The first wave of Kethvar fighters screamed toward the moon, their energy weapons charging for the opening assault. The lunar missile platforms responded immediately, launching dozens of primitive kinetic projectiles toward the approaching ships. Admiral Thekvor watched the tactical display with professional interest. The human weapons were exactly as weak as expected. The kinetic rounds moved slowly compared to energy weapons, and his fighters' shields easily absorbed the impacts. A few missiles got through and damaged some fighters, but nothing that would affect the battle's outcome. "Lunar defenses are offering minimal resistance," his tactical officer reported. "Fighter squadrons report easy penetration of human defensive fire." "Continue the assault," Admiral Thekvor replied. "Destroy those platforms and prepare for the second wave." But as his fighters closed in on the lunar installations, something unexpected happened. The human weapons stopped firing. "Sir," the tactical officer said, confusion clear in his voice, "the lunar platforms have ceased their attack. Our fighters are reporting that human weapons have gone silent." Admiral Thekvor frowned. "Have we destroyed their targeting systems?" "No, sir, the platforms appear to be undamaged. They have simply stopped shooting." Through his observation post at the edge of the system, Zixtar watched the strange pause in the battle with growing alarm. His sensors showed that the human lunar platforms were still operational and fully powered. They had simply stopped fighting for no apparent reason. Either the humans had surrendered immediately, or something else was happening. Zixtar's attention was drawn to his long-range sensors, which were detecting unusual activity in the asteroid belt. The mining operations that had appeared normal from a distance were showing strange energy patterns now that he was looking more closely. The energy signatures were too uniform, too organized for civilian mining equipment, and they were all pointing in the same direction, toward Admiral Thekvor's fleet. "Alert status change," Zixtar muttered to himself, his claws flying over his control panel. "This is not mining equipment." Admiral Thekvor was starting to have the same realization. His deep-range sensors had detected the energy buildup in the asteroid belt, and what he was seeing made no sense according to his intelligence reports. "Tactical analysis of asteroid belt activity," he ordered. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy concentrations throughout the belt. The sources appear to be the mining installations identified in our intelligence reports." "What kind of energy concentrations?" His tactical officer's voice became strained. "Sir, the energy signatures match those of large-scale kinetic acceleration systems." Admiral Thekvor felt ice forming in his stomach. "Kinetic acceleration systems?" "Railguns, sir. Very large railguns." The pieces suddenly clicked together in Admiral Thekvor's mind. The lunar platforms had not been trying to destroy his fighters. They had been calculating firing solutions. The weak kinetic rounds they had fired were not attacks. They were range-finding shots. Measuring exact distances and vectors, the real weapons had been hidden in plain sight all along. "Emergency evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "All ships scatter formation immediately!" But it was too late. The asteroids around the belt began to move. What had looked like simple mining platforms revealed themselves as massive railgun installations, each one the size of a small moon. The humans had not been mining the asteroids, they had been converting them into weapons. The first kinetic round fired from the belt was the size of a building and moving at a significant fraction of light speed. It struck a Kethvar cruiser amidships and simply erased it from existence, vaporizing the entire vessel in a flash of plasma. Then the real bombardment began. Dozens of asteroid-mounted railguns opened fire simultaneously, launching projectiles that crossed the space between the belt and Admiral Thekvor's fleet in seconds. Each round carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon, and the humans were firing them with precision that should have been impossible. "Shields are useless," the tactical officer shouted over the chaos. "Kinetic impact at these speeds exceeds our defensive capability." Admiral Thekvor watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart by weapons that should not have existed. The humans had somehow built a defensive network that turned their entire solar system into a killing field, and they had disguised it so perfectly that his intelligence services had missed it completely. But the asteroid weapons were just the beginning as his surviving ships tried to maneuver away from the kinetic bombardment. New threats appeared throughout the system. Human cargo ships that had been moving on routine trade routes suddenly activated sophisticated jamming systems that blinded HFY sensors. Research stations around Jupiter revealed massive shipyards hidden behind fake civilian installations. Dozens of human warships that had not appeared in any intelligence report began emerging from concealment. Admiral HFY realized with growing terror that the humans had not built a few hidden weapons. They had converted their entire solar system into an elaborate trap, disguised so cleverly that it looked like normal civilian activity. Zixtar watched the battle unfold with a mixture of amazement and fear. His sensors were detecting weapon systems emerging from locations throughout the Sol system. Every civilian installation seemed to have a hidden military function. The asteroid belt railguns were just the most obvious part of a defensive network that had been carefully planned and positioned over decades. The humans had not simply hidden their weapons, they had made them invisible by making them look like something else entirely. General Chen's voice suddenly appeared on all communication channels, broadcasted from Earth to both the HFY fleet and the observation vessels at the edge of the system. "Admiral HFY," she said calmly, "you made one critical error in your planning. You assumed that because we show you our hand, we are showing you all our cards." On his flagship's bridge, Admiral HFY listened to the human general's words as his fleet continued to die around him. "Humans learned long ago that the best place to hide something is in plain sight," General Chen continued. "You spent years studying our obvious defenses while completely missing our real ones." Another wave of kinetic rounds from the asteroid belt destroyed 3 more HFY ships. Admiral HFY's proud Third Fleet was being systematically dismantled by weapons that his intelligence services had classified as mining equipment. "You studied our technology and found it primitive," General Chen said. "But you failed to understand that we were studying you as well. We know your tactics, your capabilities, and your weaknesses. We have known about your planned attack for months." Admiral HFY tried to order a retreat but discovered that the human defensive perimeter extended all the way to the edge of the solar system. There was no escape route that was not covered by hidden weapons. The humans had not just prepared to defend their planet. They had prepared to capture his entire fleet. Zixtar realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that everyone had dismissed as primitive and harmless had just demonstrated military planning and strategic thinking that surpassed anything he had ever seen. The humans had not won through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had won through superior intelligence and patience, planning for a war that they knew would eventually come. As the last of Admiral HFY's ships were disabled by precision kinetic strikes, Zixtar began to understand the true implications of what he had witnessed. The galaxy had been underestimating humans for 50 years. That mistake would not be made again. Admiral HFY's fleet was trapped in the worst tactical situation he had ever experienced. Half of his ships were already destroyed or disabled, and the remaining vessels found themselves caught in a crossfire from weapons that seemed to emerge from every direction. The asteroid belt railguns continued their devastating bombardment, but they were no longer the humans' only active weapons. Throughout the Sol system, installations that had appeared completely civilian were revealing their true military nature. "Sir," his communications officer reported with barely controlled panic, "we are detecting active weapon systems at Jupiter, Saturn, and the outer planet installations. Everything we identified as research stations appears to be armed." Admiral HFY stared at the tactical display as red threat indicators appeared across the entire solar system. The humans had not simply hidden a few weapons, they had militarized every major installation in their space. "What about the cargo ships?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The civilian vessels are broadcasting jamming signals that are disrupting our targeting systems. Sir, they appear to be equipped with electronic warfare systems that match or exceed our own capabilities." The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of the deception. For 50 years, the humans had appeared to be exactly what they claimed. peaceful traders interested in learning about galactic civilization. But behind that facade, they had been preparing for war with a level of strategic thinking that left him stunned. General Chen's voice appeared on the communication channels again, broadcast from Earth with the calm tone of someone conducting a routine military exercise. Admiral Thekvor, your fleet is now completely surrounded. I am prepared to offer terms for your surrender. The word surrender sent shockwaves through the Kethvar fleet. In the entire history of their species, no Kethvar fleet had ever surrendered to an enemy. The idea was so alien to their culture that most of his officers did not even understand what the human general was proposing, but Admiral Thekvor had studied enough human history to know that these creatures thought about warfare very differently than his people. Where the Kethvar saw victory or death as the only options, humans seemed to view war as simply another form of negotiation. What terms? He transmitted back, ignoring the shocked expressions of his bridge crew. Complete disarmament of your fleet and surrender of all personnel for processing. In exchange, your crews will be treated according to galactic standards for prisoners of war and will be eventually returned to Kethvar space. Admiral Thekvor considered his options. His fleet was effectively destroyed as a fighting force. The human weapons could pick off his remaining ships at will. His crews would die for nothing if he chose to fight to the end, but surrender would mean something worse than death to his people. It would mean admitting that the mighty Kethvar had been completely outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as harmless. From his observation post, Zixtar watched the exchange with fascination. The humans were offering mercy to an enemy that had come to destroy their world, but more importantly, they were offering to send survivors back to Kethvar space, survivors who would carry the story of this battle back to their people. Zixtar realized that this was yet another calculated move by the humans. Dead enemies could be dismissed as martyrs or victims of lucky shots. Living witnesses, however, could not be ignored. The Kethvar crews would return home with detailed accounts of human capabilities, ensuring that word of this defeat spread throughout their entire empire. The humans were not just winning a battle, they were sending a message to the entire galaxy. Admiral Thekvor made his decision. I accept your terms, he transmitted, each word feeling like poison in his mouth. Excellent, General Chen replied. Please instruct your ships to power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded by our prize crews. As the Kethvar fleet began shutting down their weapon systems, Zixtar turned his attention to analyzing exactly how the humans had achieved this impossible victory. His sensors were now detecting the full scope of their preparations, and what he found left him speechless. The humans had spent 50 years converting their entire solar system into a defensive network. Every asteroid mining operation was also a weapons platform. Every research station was also a military installation. Every civilian cargo ship was also an electronic warfare vessel. But the true genius of their strategy was not in the weapons themselves, it was in how they had hidden them. Rather than trying to conceal their military preparations through secrecy, the humans had hidden them through misdirection. They had made their weapons look like something else entirely. Something so ordinary and civilian that no intelligence service would look twice at it. The asteroid belt railguns had been disguised as mining equipment because they actually were mining equipment that had been modified to also function as weapons. The research stations around Jupiter really were conducting scientific studies, while also serving as hidden shipyards. The cargo ships really were carrying trade goods, along with military-grade jamming systems. Everything the humans had shown the galaxy was true. They had simply not shown everything. Zixtar began to understand the frightening implications of human psychology. Most species thought in terms of either military or civilian applications for their technology. Humans seemed to think in terms of dual-use applications for everything. A mining laser was also a weapon. A cargo ship was also a warship. A research station was also a military base. In human thinking, there was no clear line between civilian and military technology. Everything could serve both purposes if designed correctly. As human boarding parties began taking control of the disabled Kethvar ships, Zixtar compiled his preliminary report for the Galactic Council. The implications of what he had witnessed would reshape galactic politics for generations. The humans had not just defeated a superior enemy through superior strategy. They had demonstrated a completely different approach to warfare that made conventional military thinking obsolete. Traditional military doctrine focused on building dedicated warships and military installations, but humans had shown that a properly prepared civilian infrastructure could be more effective than a conventional fleet. Every human colony world, every mining operation, every research station was potentially a military asset. The humans had not built a military. They had built a civilization that could transform into a military when threatened. General Chen's final transmission to Admiral Thekfor contained information that Zixtar found particularly disturbing. "Admiral, I want you to understand something important. This solar system's defenses represent only a fraction of human military capability. Every human colony has been prepared according to similar principles. Every human trade route is protected by similar systems." Zixtar felt his whiskers twitch as he processed this information. The humans were claiming that their victory over the HFY was not a special effort. It was standard procedure. "Your intelligence services failed to detect our preparations because they were looking for the wrong things," General Chen continued. "You were looking for warships and military bases. You failed to realize that humans do not separate civilian and military technology the way other species do." The communication ended with a statement that would be quoted throughout the galaxy for years to come. "We did not hide our strength from you, Admiral. We showed you exactly what we were capable of. You simply failed to understand what you were looking at." As the last HFY ship surrendered and human prize crews took control of the fleet, Zixtar realized that he was witnessing the end of an era. The galaxy had operated under the assumption that military and civilian capabilities were separate things. The humans had just proven that assumption wrong. Every species would now have to reconsider their relationship with humanity. The peaceful traders who asked so many questions about military technology suddenly looked very different when viewed in the light of what had just happened. Zixtar began typing his report to the Galactic Council, knowing that his words would change everything. The humans had won more than a battle. They had won a revolution in military thinking, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 days after the Battle of Sol, Zixtar sat in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, watching as the most powerful beings in the galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. The small analyst had never seen the council chamber so tense. The complete recordings of the battle played on the main display, showing the systematic destruction of the HFY Third Fleet by weapons that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Council members from dozens of species watched in stunned silence as their fundamental assumptions about human capabilities crumbled before their eyes. "This cannot be accurate," Councilmember Vorix insisted, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "The humans have no significant military technology. Our intelligence services have confirmed this repeatedly." "Our intelligence services were wrong," Zixtar replied quietly. "The humans did not hide their military capabilities. They disguised them as civilian technology so effectively that we could not tell the difference." The recording showed another angle of the asteroid belt weapons revealing themselves. Massive railgun installations that had been classified as mining equipment began their devastating bombardment of the HFY fleet. "How is this possible?" demanded Councilmember Zerath, her crystalline form flickering with confused colors. "We have observed human mining operations for decades. They use standard excavation techniques and basic industrial equipment." "They do," Zixtar agreed. "But they also modified that equipment to serve dual purposes. A mining laser that can cut through asteroids can also cut through ship armor. An ore accelerator that can launch rocks across space can also launch projectiles at enemy vessels." The implications were staggering. Every human civilian installation that the Council had dismissed as harmless was potentially a military threat. Every trade relationship, every cultural exchange, every innocent question about alien technology suddenly looked different when viewed through the lens of strategic intelligence gathering. Ambassador Sarah Chen, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, sat calmly at the human delegation table as the alien leaders debated around her. She had been invited to address the Council about the battle, but so far she had said nothing, simply listening to the confused discussions with patient attention. Finally, Council Speaker Merrickx called for order and turned to the human ambassador. "Ambassador Chen, the Council requires an explanation. How did your species develop such advanced military capabilities without our knowledge?" Ambassador Chen stood gracefully and activated a holographic display, that showed the development of human space infrastructure over the past 50 years. Honorable Council members, we did not develop these capabilities in secret. We developed them openly, with the full knowledge and often the direct assistance of many species represented in this chamber. Confused murmurs rippled through the council as various representatives tried to process this statement. The Villani provided us with improved mining laser technology 15 years ago. Ambassador Chen continued, highlighting specific installations on her display. We used their designs to build more efficient mining equipment, which we then adapted for defensive purposes. She switched to another section of the display. The Gornak shared their expertise in orbital construction techniques, which we applied to building research stations around Jupiter. Those stations served as excellent cover for hidden shipyards. The HFY themselves provided detailed information about their battle tactics and fleet formations during our trade negotiations. We used that knowledge to design defensive strategies specifically tailored to counter their strengths. The silence in the council chamber was deafening. Every species represented had contributed to human military development without realizing it. You see, Ambassador Chen said with a slight smile, humans learned early in our galactic interactions that other species were happy to share their knowledge if we simply asked the right questions. We asked about everything: culture, technology, history, military techniques. Most species were flattered by our curiosity and eager to demonstrate their expertise. Zixtar realized that his suspicions had been correct. The humans had not infiltrated galactic society. They had been invited in. Every piece of military intelligence they had gathered had been freely given by species who thought they were dealing with harmless primitives. But why? Council member Vorix demanded. Why prepare for war when you claim to seek peace? Ambassador Chen's expression became more serious. Because, honored Vorix, we studied galactic history. We learned that every peaceful species eventually faces aggressive neighbors. We decided that when that time came for humanity, we would be ready. She activated another display showing historical conflicts throughout the galaxy. The Altarians were peaceful traders until the hegemony conquered them. The Zeridians were dedicated to scientific research until they were enslaved by the Vorthon Empire. The pattern was clear. In this galaxy, the strong prey upon the weak. So we chose not to be weak. The council chamber erupted in confused discussions as representatives tried to understand the implications of what they had heard. The humans had not violated any laws or treaties. They had not deceived anyone about their intentions. They had simply prepared for a future that their study of galactic history told them was inevitable. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. There is something else the council should know, Ambassador Chen said, her voice cutting through the noise. The Sol System's defenses represent our minimum standard defensive capability. Every human colony world has been prepared according to similar principles. Zixtar felt his heart sink as he realized what this meant. The humans had not just prepared Earth, they had prepared their entire civilization for war. Furthermore, Ambassador Chen continued, we have shared our defensive technologies with several species who requested our assistance. The Altarian refugees have rebuilt their civilization using human dual-use technology. The independent Zeridian colonies have established similar defensive networks. The implications were staggering. The humans had not just defended themselves, they had begun spreading their military philosophy to other species. Council, Speaker Merrick struggled to maintain order as representatives from dozens of species began shouting questions and demands. The careful balance of power that had existed in the galaxy for centuries was crumbling in real time. Order, Speaker Merrick called, his voice echoing through the chamber. Ambassador Chen, what does humanity want from the council? Ambassador Chen smiled again, and Zixtar noticed that it was not entirely friendly. Nothing, she said simply. We want nothing from the council except what we have already received. The right to exist in peace and trade freely with our neighbors. But if any species chooses to threaten human worlds or human citizens, they should understand that we will respond with the full capability of our civilization. The HFY learned this lesson. We hope it will not need to be repeated. The session ended in chaos as representatives rushed to contact their home governments with news that would reshape galactic politics. Treaties would need to be renegotiated. Military strategies would need to be completely reconsidered. Trade relationships would take on new significance. Zixtar remained in his seat long after the chamber had emptied, staring at the displays that still showed the systematic destruction of the Kethvar fleet. As an intelligence analyst, he was supposed to understand threats and assess capabilities. But the humans had shown him that his entire profession was based on outdated assumptions. They had not hidden their capabilities through deception or secrecy. They had hidden them through a level of strategic thinking that treated every interaction as part of a larger plan. Every trade deal, every cultural exchange, every innocent question had been part of a 50-year intelligence-gathering operation that made conventional espionage look primitive. The humans had turned the galaxy's openness and willingness to share knowledge into a weapon that no one had seen coming. Zixtar began typing his final report, knowing that his recommendations would influence council policy for generations. Species classification: human, reclassify from peaceful traders to advanced strategic civilization. Threat assessment unknown. Recommend immediate diplomatic engagement to establish clear boundaries and expectations. Military capability far exceeds previous estimates. Assume all human civilian infrastructure has potential military applications. Recommendation: immediate elevation to protected status. Not for their protection, but for ours. As Zixtar finished his report, he realized that the galaxy had learned a hard lesson about making assumptions. The humans had appeared weak because they wanted to appear weak. They had seemed harmless because it served their strategic interest to seem harmless. But beneath the facade of curious traders and eager students, humanity had been preparing for war with a patience and thoroughness that no other species had imagined possible. The galaxy would never underestimate them again. In fact, Zixtar suspected that the opposite problem would now emerge. Other species would become so concerned about human capabilities that they would forget about human intentions. The humans still wanted peace and trade. They had simply ensured that they would never be forced to accept anything else.